In 1963, a man in central Turkey was renovating his house when he knocked through a wall in his basement and found a tunnel he had never known was there. He followed it into the dark, and what it opened into was not a room, not a cellar, not a cave. It was a city, a vast, silent city cut straight down into the rock beneath his own home, 18 levels deep, with room enough to swallow 20,000 people, their animals and everything they owned. Threaded with ventilation shafts, sealed by great rolling stones. And to this day, no one is entirely certain who carved the very first levels or when. This is Derinkuyu, and it is one of the most astonishing and most haunting things human beings have ever built. To understand it, picture the place. This is Cappadocia, in the heart of Turkey, a dreamlike landscape of soft volcanic rock, eroded over ages into valleys, ridges, and tall stone cones. And the people here discovered something remarkable about that rock. It is soft enough to carve with simple hand tools, yet it hardens as it meets the air. You could dig a home, or, given enough time, an entire city, straight down into the earth. Derinkuyu is the deepest such city ever found. It plunges as many as 18 levels, by some measures around 85 meters, the height of a 20-story tower, driven downward into solid stone. And it was no simple hiding hole scratched out in a panic. Archaeologists have mapped a staggering warren of it: stables, storerooms, kitchens, oil and wine presses, wells, refectories, and chapels, all linked by stairways and tunnels engineered to be sealed and defended one level at a time. Whoever shaped this place was not improvising. They were thinking, carefully and across generations, about how to keep a whole population alive, fed, and hidden, deep underground. At its height, Derinkuyu could shelter as many as 20,000 people at once, together with their cattle, their food stores, and their water, sealed away from the surface for months at a time. This was not a basement. It was a functioning world, complete in itself. The exact number is debated, and 20,000 may be the upper limit rather than the everyday reality. But even the most cautious estimates describe thousands of men, women, and children living for weeks at a stretch in total darkness, breathing, cooking, sleeping, and surviving on nothing but what they had carried down and what the rock around them could provide. Down in the dark were stables for the animals with holes cut to tether them, cellars and storerooms heavy with provisions, kitchens, their ceilings still black with ancient soot, communal dining halls, wine and oil presses, deep wells, and further down, chapels and even a school, all carved from the living rock. And nearly all of it had been forgotten. The full city slept behind that basement wall until 1963, opening to the world only a few years later. For generations, an entire town had been living on the roof of this place, walking, sleeping, raising children, with no idea of the sheer scale of what lay beneath their feet. The popular version of the story is almost too perfect. The homeowner, it is said, kept losing his chickens into a mysterious gap that opened up during the renovation, and following that gap led him into the tunnels. Whether or not every detail is exact, the core of it is true. A modern family discovered a vast lost city hidden directly beneath their own home. And Derinkuyu is not even alone. Cappadocia conceals hundreds of underground spaces and dozens of buried towns. And Derinkuyu is thought to be joined to a second underground city, Kaymakli, by a tunnel running several kilometers through the rock. An entire hidden country beneath the visible one. But the deeper you descend, the more one question takes hold. Not just who lived down here, but how, in the name of everything, they made it survivable. Because a city 18 levels underground has one brutal, immediate problem: air. Pack thousands of people and animals into sealed stone, light fires to cook and see by, and within hours you should all suffocate in the dark. Derinkuyu did not. Its builders had solved it. The city is laced with more than 50 narrow ventilation shafts, dropping from the surface down through every single level. They drew fresh air deep into the earth and let smoke and stale air rise away, a passive climate system that worked silently, without a single moving part, for thousands of people at once. It is worth sitting with how clever that is. No fans, no pumps, no electricity, just the natural movement of air between the cold depths and the warmer surface, carefully channeled through shafts cut in the right places, at the right widths. Get that calculation wrong on this scale, even slightly, and everyone sheltering below would quietly suffocate in the dark. Some of those shafts ran all the way down to groundwater, doubling as wells, so a population under siege could drink without ever showing their faces above ground. And crucially, the wells could be sealed off from below, so that an enemy on the surface could not poison the water of the people hiding in the dark. Every detail assumes a determined attacker, and that is the single thread running through the whole design. The disguised entrances, the sealable water, the suffocating narrowness of the corridors, the way each level could be cut off from the next. Every choice points to one fixed obsession, keeping a ruthless enemy out, while thousands of frightened, vulnerable people waited in the blackness just beyond the stone. And nowhere is that clearer than in the city's signature defense, the rolling stone doors. Great discs of carved stone, up to 1.5 meters across, weighing hundreds of kilograms, standing on edge in channels cut beside the tunnels. When danger came, the people inside would heave these wheels of stone across the corridor, sealing off a whole level from within. They could only be moved from the inside, and a small hole bored through the center may have let the defenders see out, or strike out, while anyone trying to force the door could barely move in the cramped, lightless tunnel beyond. Picture trying to break in. You squeeze, alone, down a corridor barely wide enough for your shoulders, in total darkness, toward a half-ton wheel of stone you cannot push, while unseen people wait on the other side. It is, quite simply, one of the most effective defensive designs of the entire ancient world. An attacking army loses every advantage it has the moment it steps inside. Numbers count for nothing when only one man fits in the tunnel. Brute strength is useless against a stone that moves only from the far side. Even fire and smoke could be drawn harmlessly away through those same ventilation shafts. Derinkuyu was, in effect, built to make a siege simply not worth attempting. And far down, on the lowest levels, the rock opens into something grander, vaulted halls, and a great church laid out in the shape of a cross. This was not a hole dug in a single afternoon of fear. It was a place prepared, patiently, over centuries, to hold an entire community's life beneath the ground. Standing in that buried church, lit now by electric bulbs, but once by guttering oil lamps, you feel the strangeness of it completely. A place of worship, a granary, a stable and a fortress, all hollowed into the same cold rock, all serving the same stubborn purpose, to outlast whatever was coming. Which brings us to the question that even now has no clean answer. Who built all of this? And when did they begin? Here, Derinkuyu guards its deepest secret. Because the very softness of the rock that made the city possible also makes it almost impossible to date. There are no tree rings, no neat layers of debris, no inscription announcing the year work began. Just tool marks on stone, marks that could be almost any age at all. The leading idea is that the first upper levels were cut by the Phrygians, an Anatolian people of the Iron Age, perhaps around the 8th or 7th century before Christ. Some researchers argue the origins reach back further still, but the honest answer is that the earliest chapters of Derinkuyu are genuinely, frustratingly uncertain. What we do know is that it was enlarged and used for a very long time. By the early Christian centuries, the people of Cappadocia, Greek-speaking Byzantines, had expanded Derinkuyu enormously, adding the churches, the great rolling doors, and much of what we see today. They turned a refuge into a fortress. It was during this long Byzantine chapter that Derinkuyu took on much of its final form: the cross-shaped church, the rooms that may have served as missionary schools, the presses for wine and oil, and the heavy rolling doors that could shut the outside world away completely. A place of quiet worship and desperate defense, sharing the very same darkness. And they needed it. For centuries, this region lay on a brutal frontier. Arab armies drove deep into Anatolia. Later, other raiders followed. When attackers appeared on the horizon, the alarm would spread, and an entire town could simply vanish. down the shafts, into the rock, sealing the stone doors behind them. Imagine it. The fields emptying in minutes, families filing down into the cold and the dark, children, animals, sacks of grain, and pulling the world shut above their heads. Then waiting, by lamplight, in absolute silence, for the danger above to pass. Sometimes for months. And if one city were ever breached, there was an escape. The kilometers-long tunnel to the neighboring underground city of Kaymakli meant whole communities could move, unseen, between strongholds, without ever surfacing into the daylight. And astonishingly, this was not all ancient history. Local Christians are said to have sheltered in Derinkuyu as recently as the 20th century, before the city was finally emptied, and for a few short decades, forgotten all over again. When the region's Greek-speaking Christians departed in the great population exchange of the early 20th century, much of that living memory left with them. The tunnels went dark and silent, and it would take a chance swing of a renovator's hammer decades later to wake the sleeping city and remind the modern world it had ever existed at all. So what is Derinkuyu in the end? It is not a single monument raised by one people in one shining moment. It is something stranger and far more human, a refuge dug and redug across thousands of years by people who simply needed, again and again, to disappear. A civilization's instinct for survival carved downward into the dark. We can walk its tunnels today. We can lean our weight against the rolling stones and stand in the silence of its buried church. But we still cannot say for certain who first lifted a tool in the darkness and began to carve this city down into the earth. And here is the part that should keep you up tonight. If it unsettles you that people carved an entire city down into the rock, and we cannot say who began it, then you are not ready for what people built up, out of the ground, 6,000 years before Derinkuyu. Before farming, before writing, before the wheel. They raised stone pillars heavier than these doors into great rings on a hilltop, and then deliberately buried them. That place is on your screen right now. Go and see what came before everything. Derinkuyu, the city beneath the town, 18 stories of human fear and genius, hidden so completely that for a while we forgot it was ever there at all.